There are now massive development on Treasure Island. There are trucks, there are construction companies, yet on Treasure Island people are still getting cancer, people are still getting contaminated, and the Navy is saying that Treasure Island is safe. We don't believe that, and the records of the contamination at Treasure Island are quite extensive. So our next speaker is Carol Harvey, who is an investigative journalist who has done many stories on Treasure Island and knows about the fraud and the corruption at Treasure Island, which, by the way, Gavin Newsom is totally aware of. He was aware of what was going on at Treasure Island as well as Hunters Point when he was mayor of San Francisco. Welcome, Carol Harvey.
Hi, yes, my name is Carol Harvey, and I've written 60 articles about Treasure Island over the last 5 years. They've been published on the San Francisco Bayview newspaper, which has an interest in both Treasure Island and Hunters Point, which I have called Siamese twins. They are literally identical. Hunters Point has 450 acres. People don't know that Treasure Island is almost the same at 405 acres. People don't think much about Treasure Island because there's been a media blockade by the powers that be, who are interested in redeveloping the place. And they're fast-tracking the redevelopment now. The Navy polluted that island with radiation, chemicals, asbestos, and lead starting 61 years ago. The entire island is filled with radiation and chemicals. In 1965, around 1965, the Navy decided to build Navy housing, and they decided to build that housing at the back of the island where they had previously had burn pits. Basically, it was a garbage dump. The Navy took all of their refuse and dumped it at the back of the island on the Golden Gate Bridge side of the island, and they burned it. The problem is that when you burn the kind of trash that they had, it turns into chemicals, highly potent chemicals. In around 65, the Navy graded all that land back there by those burn pits and built housing on it for the Navy, for the sailors that they were training in a series of schools they set up on the island to teach sailors how to handle radiation in times of war. After they dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they decided all wars from then on would be nuclear. So they started to train sailors. They set up radiation schools, and those sailors' families lived in that housing. Well, when Treasure Island was turned over, when the Navy left in about 1997, the city of San Francisco, which at that point was headed by Willie Brown, and I think it still is, that's just my opinion, decided that they would solve San Francisco's perennial homeless problem by sending homeless people out to Treasure Island and putting them in programs, subsidized programs in that housing, the old Navy housing. Well, that housing was back at that time filled, lined with asbestos, and the asbestos was later outlawed, but the housing was built over these toxic burn pits with all kinds of chemicals in the burn pits. Also, the Navy laced the entire island with radiation pieces. They called them little pieces of radiation that they wanted the sailors to find in the soil with Geiger counters as part of their training. The Navy also had set up a mock ship built. It was landlocked. It was built on the shore facing San Francisco at first. And I love this name. It was called the Pandemonium 1. And on that ship, sailors were taught to handle radiation. They were given cesium-137, and it was in liquid form, and the sailors' training was to wash the cesium-137 into the soil underneath the ship. In case of wartime, how to get rid of cesium-137? Oh, of course, you wash it away with water. That's not the way you handle radiation, but at any rate, so this island Then they moved the pandemonium around to the other side of the island, and about 1967, and until the 70s, they continued this practice on the opposite side of the island. So this island is thoroughly saturated. They also had, with radiation and chemicals, they also stored plutonium there in a underground storage bunker, along with the cesium. And when Steve and I went out to the island last week and I gave him a toxic tour, we showed him that underground bunker. He can verify that it is in fact there where the plutonium was stored and cesium-137 was stored. So the Navy on Treasure Island has said perennially, constantly, that the island is safe, and yet they've had people living next to the cleanup zones that they have surrounded by fences with radiation signs on them. There are 5 of them. And in 2006, the Navy published a historical radiological assessment which stated in total that the island was clean, that their testing proved the island was clean. But then a reporter came in and found cesium in the soil. His name was Matt Smith. Hats off to him. He found cesium, and the California Department of Public Health came in and told the Navy to do their studies all over again. So the Navy did their studies all over again, and they did it with Tetra Tech. Tetra Tech was involved from the beginning. Tetra Tech is still involved at Treasure Island, and when the Hunters Point scandal broke about Tetra Tech on Treasure Island, I've been to all the RAB meetings out there, they immediately tried to disappear Tetra Tech from the island. Tetra Tech was running the RAB meetings, and they set up the situation to make it sound like Tetra Tech was gone. Tetra Tech is not gone. Tetra Tech is still out there. Whistleblowers that were at Hunters Point found the same kind of malfeasance at Treasure Island. I could go on, the history is long, but the 2 places are identical, equally contaminated. Some people say Treasure Island is worse than Hunters Point, and the Navy continues to say it's safe, while people who live in that old Navy housing are getting cancers and tumors. And the latest thing I've seen is horrible butterfly rashes down the bodies of the people who are living out there now. We think that's from lead in the water that they're drinking. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Carol.